Alrighty, party peoples of the interwebs, I can say with certainty that I have never told anybody how to vote, but I certainly let people know what I think of them, depending on who they vote for, and if you vote for a liberal,
You are an idiot.
You know, here's the thing, Canada. I think we all have to wake up and realize that if we want to have the same problem, then the Liberals are the way to go. But it's funny because their narrative hasn't changed, even though their party leader has. So we all know Justin Trudeau, bye-bye, he's gone. You got Mark Carney in there. And now people are actually having conversations about how it's a little bit problematic is that Mr. Carney here is actually equating some of our housing issues to the Trump administration. He came flat out that he's got this new idea on how housing should be fixed and advanced and everything else, all because it's a reaction to the tariffs by President Donald Trump. So I've got a real problem with this because here's the thing. Our housing problem is at least a decade old, and it's all because the Liberals. And now all of a sudden they want to post blame to the new president of the United States. So I'm not sure why we should even be considering anything like this. But out of the gate, we've got Mark Carney he's changing the narrative because he's looking to get some votes. And part of it is, of course, is Mark Carney's Liberals unveil Canada's most ambitious housing plan since the Second World War. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Mark Carney came up with this? You know, it sounds a little bit familiar. Wasn't there another guy that had something to say about housing? Let's take a look.
Today, we are releasing the most comprehensive and ambitious housing plan ever seen in Canada. It builds on the sizable...
Okay, that is almost a year and a half old. And by 2031, so if we back it up 7 years, Mr. Trudeau here was making a commitment to what? Very similar to Mr. Carney's latest announcement. It's almost like they've got the same speechwriters. Now, here's the thing. How did the Liberal government do last year in 24? Our construction was actually down in comparison to what they were equating the numbers to be. I mean, they're basically saying, 500, 600,000 homes they're going to build if we average it out over the next 7 years? Not even close.
We used to build things in this country. After the Second World War, Canada faced a housing crisis. The government built prefabricated homes that were easy to assemble and inexpensive. And those homes are still here 80 years later. Now we're in another housing crisis. And it's time your government got back into the business of building affordable homes. We will build new homes for Canadians at a pace not seen since the Second World War. We'll build a Canada you can afford.
All right, so let's break it down. Mark Carney knows nothing about construction, so he wants to do the prefab homes, blah, blah, blah. Hey, one more Liberal that is completely dysfunctional about talking about construction. 500,000 homes in a year. Does anybody know what the top number that Canada did produce? Maxed out, we can push maybe 230, 240,000 homes at best, and out of nowhere, he's sitting there saying that the government is going to become the builder. They think that they're going to reinvent everything that happened all these years later. But my question to you is this. How many people want to live in those little shoebox homes? You know, we used to call them wartime bungalows, and they were great. They're normally in neighborhoods with really big lots. Yes, people did raise kids in them. You know what? My grandparents had one of them, and that's one of the things that people have to look at is like, can you do it? Yes. But Mr. Carney, I'm going to ask you, are you going to live in one of those? Oh, no, that's right. You're going to stay down in the United States in your mansion. So, or whatever you're going to get given to you here in Canada. Cut red tape and make it easier to build? Wow, there's a campaign promise. You know what? You've been talking about it. Your government's been talking about it. And the same people that are in place, you just shifted their hats. But everybody's talking about red tape. It's really not getting any better. And cut taxes for first-time homebuyers. Wow, really? Okay, so we're going to cut out the HST. So big deal, okay? The fact is that affordability has a lot to do with development charges. And Mr. Carney, you know what? I don't see you sitting there making a commitment to the builders and the municipalities removing the necessary taxes so we can actually bring down our costs. No, you sit there and you say you're going to turn around and come up with some neat scheme for loans and everything else, and everybody's going to come in. Canadians need a government that isn't going to do this bait and switch with numbers. I'm sorry, but everybody in Canada, let's be very clear. Any number this government gives you for completion of construction is an impossible number. We can't build 500,000 homes a year. When Trudeau turned around and came up with that 3.9 million by 2031, I called BS on it because it's an impossibility. Not only do we not have the trades, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the development ability. So, you know what? At this stage, again, this is just a liberal lie for votes. So for you to rev this up, we would have to get stuck with you for decades. And Canada can't take it. You've already made it very, very clear the direction you want Canada to go in. And it's not the direction for Canadians. It's your WEF agenda, your New World Order, your Chinese influence. Mark, it's time for you to step aside, okay? We need real leadership if Canada's going to prosper. And your party has shown that it can't do that. Now, again, this is just one person's opinion. But I have to tell you, I back everything by facts when we talk about construction, okay? And when we talk about real estate.
Let's go to criticize the liberals, who I hate, who I want to destroy, who have no place in a position of power, and somehow their liberal followers are too stupid to understand that. And by way of example, let's start slowly with a tweet from Mark Carney, who's always promising a utopia of a future, ignoring the last decade of liberal devastation. Mark Carney, at Mark J. Carney, 3 passport-carrying WEF, Davos-speaking, Bilderberg meeting-attending globalist whore. We've got a lot to build in this country, and we need a lot more builders, so we'll cover training costs and make it easier to work anywhere in Canada. It's going to be a great time to be in the skilled trades. To which I responded, always promising the future to distract from the failure of their past, quote, leadership, end quote. It's what every dictator does. Promise utopia while delivering hell, and then blaming others for the hell that they have delivered. The liberals have been in power for a decade. In fact, just to fact check myself, they've been in power for 9.5 years. They have brought nothing but devastation, destruction, division, and more to Canada, and now they're running on basically promising to undo the consequences of their last decade of failed policy. And when I say that if you vote for the liberals, you are an idiot, here is what one of their idiotic sycophants is saying on Twitter. Henry A. at Henry AGS. In Canada, carbon tax is down, gas prices are down, taxes are cut, interprovincial trade is up, Canada's reputation is up, the Canadian dollar is up, the far right is down, Tamara Leach, Chris Barber found guilty, nature is healing, and then you have a picture of that weasel, Mark J. Carney, globalist whore. To which I responded, carbon tax, ... a creation of the liberals, high gas prices, ... a consequence of liberal policy, high taxes, ... a hallmark gift of the liberals. Imagine having a political base that is so retarded they will re-elect you after you last minute and just in time for an election temporarily undo the mistakes they implemented over the last decade. That is the Liberal Party and its idiot followers. How could anyone be so stupid or disingenuous? Well, they could be paid. That's always possible. I suspect Carney is running something of a Kamala Harris campaign in that they are in fact paying influencers to go put out a positive message for the Liberal Party. How else can people be so stupid and ill-informed? The rampant partisan propaganda of the CBC state-funded broadcasting to the tune of $1 billion a year, supporting the party that has promised to almost double their budget if they get reelected as compared to the other party that has promised potentially to defund them. Who do you think they're going to report favorably for? And by way of quintessential example, here's some propaganda coming from the CBC as relates to how bad the Conservative Party of Canada allegedly is. Andrew Frei Friesen at Friesen_F. Wow, reports of Poilievre not allowing questions from certain reporters and his staffers pushing and shoving journalists at his events. What's next? He's just going to hop in a big truck and honk at everyone? To which I replied as follows. CBC putting out negative reports on the Conservatives? The same CBC that sued the Conservatives for copyright infringement in 2021, case was dismissed. The same CBC that the Conservatives promised to defund if elected and Liberals promised to increase their funding if elected. Yep, I'm sure the reporting is going to be objective and unbiased. At CBC News is fake news, Pravda state-funded propaganda.
So, Canada, how do you feel about your new prime minister who wasn't elected? Before everybody gets their shorts in a knot, let's just understand how this came about. So, Prime Minister Trudeau decides to prorogue the government, tells everybody he's going to find a new leader for the party. What's he do? Yeah, they turn around, they have kind of a mock election. Carney wins, Trudeau steps down, Carney steps in, and all of a sudden we've got an unelected prime minister running the country. Now, again, there was no federal election, okay? So Canadians didn't get to vote, just the Liberal Party members turned around and made him the leader, which then subsequently he becomes the prime minister. So what does he do his first few days in power? Well, you know what? Instead of actually dealing with the things at home against our actual borders, the ones that we're, adjoined with, he turns around and runs off to the EU because this is what he's notorious for doing. In fact, he barely has a residence in Canada, really hasn't lived here in a decade, even though he's been Trudeau's advisor. So yeah, Trudeau's gone, but Carney, is he any better? No, definitely not. In fact, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing out of this guy just goes to show you why everybody has been warning us around the world about his intentions. Let's take a look at what he does and speaks when he's in France.
With you, Mr. President, I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries.
Wow, that's kind of a cool definition. We are the most European of non-European. Hey, what continent are we on? Oh, hang on, let me check a map. That's right, North America. Gee, Mr. Carney, do you forget what we are? We're North American. Yeah, a lot of people don't like the word American, but that's the truth. Canada's in North America, and you are so quick to sell out Canada to, I don't know, the people that might be padding your pocket. You're so quick to sell out Canada to everybody else. It's unbelievable.
What potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid?
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
Wow. What a condescending, gaslighting, narcissistic pig. You know what? This guy has no experience in politics, being a leader. Yeah, people can talk about, Brookfield Asset Management. And you know what? By the way, he was never voted in. They just brought him in and turned around to run the thing. So, when you take a look at this guy, he doesn't want to disclose his billions in assets and who he's truly working for. The whole carbon footprint Carney is just front and center right now. In fact, this was brought up as well.
Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the European Union? Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the United Kingdom? Guess what one of the requirements will be to diversify trade to emerging Asia? Is to have a form of price on carbon. So we are able to think one step ahead.
One step ahead. Are you kidding me? Take your foot off of Canadians' throats. You are unbelievable. You sit there and say, okay, and by the way, that whole mockery situation where you sat there and you signed that piece of paper saying, I'm canceling the carbon tax, you're full of shit. You know why? That's not how Canadian politics work. You know what? Big picture, everybody's sitting there saying, bait and switch. Well, this guy is by far the biggest bait and switch.